Well, thank you so much, Miss Wendy Nguyen and Miss Anh Nguyen from RHF. And up next, I would like to invite on stage Miss Bhuvan from ELSA Speak. She will have a presentation on how GenAI has changed education. Bhuvan is the co-founder of ELSA Speak, a prominent AI-powered English language learning app that focuses on pronunciation and fluency. ELSA has become a global success, making her a reputable entrepreneur in the edtech space. Please welcome Bhuvan.
Hello. Hi, good evening. Hopefully you guys are very awake after a long break for lunch. I really love it when Wendy said that her presentation doesn't have a lot of technical details and data, because mine is even less technical in data than that. But it's addressing a topic that I'm personally passionate about, which is education. Just very quick story. 8 years ago, I started ELSA, which is an attempt to build an AI tutor for English learning. I reached out to a lot of experts in the AI field, and actually Dr. Quoc Le here was one of the original brain behind what we were working at ELSA, and then he continued to go on and solve a bigger problem for the world. I stayed with this little mission of mine, which is in education. But one of the professors at Johns Hopkins University was really kind to help me to understand how AI can be used in language learning. But after a few conversations with him, when I invited him to be my advisor, he basically said, Vu, he sent me a paper, because the question that after he explained to me a lot of the different concepts, I went back to him and asked, so what exactly is artificial intelligence? Even though I tried to build an AI for a language learner. So he sent me a basic paper and said, Vu, you gotta read it. 8 years in, I'm still a newbie in AI, but it's still a very big problem that I believe that AI can now solve for education. So today I'll talk about the impact of AI in learning, the impact of AI in teaching, also in corporate training, and a few call out for us as we work in this space, and what should we be thinking about as we continue to drive impact in education. So we might have heard about generative AI for the last 2-3 years. We live and breathe AI now, but there was a time at the beginning where we probably hear a lot about, is really generative AI a threat to education? Are we really making the students lazy? Are we really killing creativity? Are we really make them losing the independent thinking? Or we then later on hear a wave of universal tutoring. You probably see this in every single Facebook ads, Google ads about AI tutor. You pay a lot of money for it. And so the conversation now become, what can AI do? Right? So the other question that we've heard is to use AI or not to use AI. That is the question. But where we are right now, 2-3 years in, after generative AI become an explosive concept, the education world has started flipping the narrative. Instead of asking about how will AI impact education, it's clear that it's impacting a lot in education, but the bigger question is, how are we, or what are the new and effective ways that we can use AI in teaching and learning? And I think that's a big question that all of us are trying to solve for. So first of all, in the impact of generative AI in learning, there are multiple ways that AI has already showing impacts in education for learners. Personalized learning is a very big topic that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. Homework assistant, again, this has been a huge debate, right? Like, are we taking away the ability for students to do their own homework? How are we figuring out cheating? And what can we do about it? But it's actually the opposite of the equation. It is asking the institution and school and organization to rethink about how we test the students, how we give the problems to the students to encourage a very different way of learning. Research acceleration, access. Global education access is a huge issue in education. It's all about inclusivity for education. And with GenAI, it started opening up education opportunity for people in different parts of the world that might not be possible before. A big challenge in education is not to build and use technology, but only addressing the top 1, top 5, top 10% of the population. But how do we build a solution that can reach the massive audience? And it actually does enhance cognitive skills. So it is promoting the students to learn more critically, to make the decision to all of these AI-driven technologies. But personalized learning, how big is that impact that can happen? So I think some of you, especially in the education world, you might be familiar with this two sigma problem that Bloom has talked about in the early 80s, and it has gone long unresolved. But one of his biggest theses is if we offer the student, an average student, a one-on-one tutoring experience using mastery techniques, you actually see on that further right-hand side chart, the orange chart, it provides a 2 standard deviations better performance in a classroom for students. So just think about it. 2 standard deviation means, in simpler words, you take an average student to an excellent student, or you take a below average student to above average student. And that's huge. That changes the landscape. But the biggest challenge back in the early 80s when Bloom had this problem is that personalized one-on-one mentorship and tutoring is not possible. The cost, the feasibility, the scalability of it, the feasibility and the scalability of it is not there. And this is where GenAI can come in and solve it. So at ELSA, we also take personalized learning to be an AI English tutor to the next level and really pushing that boundaries, right? So learning speaking English is exactly the same problem. You cannot have a teacher standing on stage and teaching a group of 30 students sitting in the back. It requires a lot of one-on-one learning. It requires a lot of interactive and real-time feedback. So building an AI tutor really solved for all of that challenge. So we start out with learner profiles, which I talk about it in a second. But we take all of the information that we want to learn about the learners, and then we build an adaptive, hyper-personalized learning path for that learners based on all of the information that we know about them. And then we do a progression tracking, which then loop back into the learner profile, which then impact the learning path that we built because it's adaptive. And then, of course, at the end, we provide a very flexible learning environment that is inclusive, that's allowing learners to do what they want, when they want, with no judgment. Right? That's very important in education for us. But this is not just for AI English tutor at ELSA. This process can be applied in pretty much every single domain in education, whether it's math tutor, whether it's biology, music, art. It's the same concept that can be used in application for education. So personalized AI tutor, what is that in the learner profile? This is just a few examples that we take into consideration at ELSA, and the list continues to evolve. But we take in the needs and the interests of the learners. What are they here for? Why do they need English? Right? We take in the mother tongue. This is very particular to English learning because where you come from, what's your L1 language, really impacts the challenges in English communication that you face. A Vietnamese person have a very different set of challenges in English communication compared to a Mexican or Japanese or Chinese person. What is your roles in your work if you're a professional? What is your goals here? Are you here to get a better job? Are you here to switch career? Are you here to travel the world? Are you here to meet and date people from different cultures? Right? And then what is your skill competency? Meaning, are you really challenging in your grammars because you have a very different grammar rules in your country? Or are you really challenged in vocabularies? And that's what we solve for. And then taking all of that information, we then build an adaptive learning path, which is huge impact in teaching for educators because this is the task that has never been possible before. So talking about adaptive learning path, it's really reshaping the landscape once generative AI become a powerful tool for educators. Again, think about all of the input that you can get. And for us, using the standard prompting technology is not as powerful in educational context. What we do is we call it a meta-prompt methodology, which is basically providing more context and understanding around that versus a straight prompt technology that you see, which is much better for a daily routine conversation, right? And so then with the meta prompt, what we do is we take in student demographics, again, learning objectives, the needs, cognitive needs of the students. More importantly, now that we get the data, we get the ongoing student performance, and then we get the information about how they perform in the last 5 minutes, how they learn in the last 10 hours, how they learn in the last 3 months, and continuously changing the learning path so that every single student get the lesson that exactly meets their expectation. And people have different learning style, different pace, and all of that information is then put into the input of our prompt technology so that we can produce a very different learning path for them. And this is more powerful than humans. We will need an army of teachers and humans if we want to create content, what we call it personalized learning path for every single student. At ELSA, we are a very small company. We serve about 60 million users from different parts of the world. But imagine there are 1.5 billion English learners around the world that need a solution. If we have to rely on humans, there's no way that humans can do it. So with GenAI, it's a significant shift from traditional teaching methods and curriculum creation into what is now extremely personalized, right? Lessons continuously redefined, more inclusive learning environment. I think I mentioned inclusiveness just because that's one of the biggest challenges that education world has always been trying to solve for. We try to reduce the lesson planning time significantly for educators. It's not really to replace the teachers, but it's really enabling the teachers to stay with the task that's much more important that human can solve for, but AI cannot solve for, right? Trying to understand the students' motivation, making sure that they stay with their motivation, achieving the progress and the outcomes that they want, but leave the mundane jobs of content creation, curriculum planning, lesson creation to what AI can do best. More responsive and effective learning experience, which eventually lead to much, much better outcomes for the students as well. And we're excited, as an educator, we're excited about what adaptive learning path can really do to the students and to the learners in different parts of the world. And so GenAI Tutor is powerful in the classroom. It does go beyond the classroom. And for us, I'll talk a little bit just how we approach corporate training as well, which is pushing the boundary of education and entering a different space. But it has an equally important impact. English communication, the reason why I started the company was I really believed in the power of communication. It's really unlocking the full potential that each of us has. It gives you an equal place to compete with other people as long as you're good in what you're doing. I still remember 8 years ago when I was actually at Stanford interviewing for a job. And I think Paul here, who's one of our esteemed speakers that you're going to be hearing in just a little bit, I was sharing in one of the early reasons why I started ELSA was in one of my job interviews, I was asking the interviewer for, can I get that information sheet? But instead of saying that, I was basically saying, can I get that information sheet? And so he was really staring at me for the longest time. And I don't know what happened. And luckily, I did get that job, but he did call me out at the end of the interview and say, really call it out. And for the first time, people were kind enough to call it out the mistakes that you made, because it sounds as simple as it is. Either people are being polite or they don't want to put the burden on themselves. They won't give you that feedback. But it was a really big wake-up call for me, because I went from being extremely confident about my English to really being aware of the challenges that could put me at a different position. And one of the biggest research in language learning from University of Chicago said, if you don't speak fluent English, you lose about 20-25% of your credibility. Think about it. It means that whatever you say, people trust you 20% less. That's huge in an education world, in a professional. So we really push the solution to corporate training just because I really want people to avoid the mistakes that I made and really unleash their full potential. And so for us, what we do is when we go to companies, we build what we call an enterprise-specific LLMs. So I think we talked a lot earlier in the morning about how LLMs is really powerful, but instead of using a general LLM, which has a much less context of that industry or that company, we then gather all of the information about the companies from the knowledge sources that we can get or that industry, whether that's banking, hospitality, IT outsourcing softwares. We take all of the information that we have, whether that's company onboarding materials, training documents, what is the company design metrics, what are they planning for each of the employees, and we deploy a knowledge graph, which I mentioned, I explained in a little bit, just to build what we call it an industry or enterprise-specific LLM, so that it becomes a lot more accurate, and it's also trying to minimize the hallucination that we talked about earlier today. So this is what we do, and it's still continuously evolving, but this is knowledge graph that we're working on. So we build a richer semantic understanding that can really build the relationship between different data points. Because of that, it gives us a better or more accurate retrieval methodology for that particular client or enterprise or that industry that we're working on versus a very generic model that serves different purpose. And then we use that knowledge graph to send relevant data to our specialized LLM, that we leverage data from our users so that we continuously to evolve that. And again, it's help enhance performance and minimize all of the hallucinations. And so this is powerful for the corporate training, particularly for each of the industry that we have been and continue to work on. And that's really what we are going to be trying to solve for the next 10 years. 8 years ago, I started the company when AI was less talked about, and I'm very happy and proud that we will continue on this journey to really solve for the challenge of education. Thank you.